In 1926, a press release from the American Museum of Natural History in New York City announced an upcoming exhibition titled The Indian at Play, slated to open November. The exhibit was described as presenting for the first time types of games played by North American Indians in their everyday life. The museum's director of education wrote that it had long been assumed that primitive peoples had no leisure time. However, recent research suggested otherwise. In fact, according to the anthropologist working on the exhibit, games were so popular among Native Americans that they frequently interrupted work in order to play. This idea was shocking to some. For years, dominant narratives about indigenous cultures portrayed them as unchanging, uncivilized, and barbaric. By extension, they were seen as incapable of producing anything new, let alone adapting to changing circumstances. So, news of a museum exhibit devoted entirely to Native American recreation was not only interesting, but could also be quite subversive. As for what these so-called primitive games might look like, well, the museum's promo materials were keen to assure readers that while they differed from contemporary American pastimes, they were just as athletic and vigorous. The Indian at Play would feature shinny, a precursor to field hockey, lacrosse, and ice hockey. Lacopa, or stickball, basically dodgeball with sticks. And Manitouish, or the deer game, a hunting simulation in which players used bows and arrows to try to shoot down a headdress representing a deer. The exhibition was also said to include games from the Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest, such as the hoop game, in which teams tried to push a hoop over their opponent's goal line. And to demonstrate the universality of certain sports concepts, the organizers noted that one of the exhibits featured a board game that was very similar to checkers. Today, all of these activities are long gone, replaced by cultural institutions and sport leagues run by settler organizations. But we know about them thanks to early American anthropologists who were eager to document indigenous cultures before they disappeared. Their writings contain descriptions of games, rules, strategies, and rituals associated with hundreds of different activities across the continent. Together, these texts paint a picture of a rich, diverse, and dynamic culture that predated and coexisted with American sport as we know it. But the story doesn't end there. That's because these sports weren't just observed by outsiders. They were also played by Native Americans themselves, both then and now. The following is a small sampling of the many sports that indigenous people have played since before the United States existed. Nowhere in North America were games more central to daily life than in the Iroquois Confederacy, a group of 5 nations in what is today upstate New York, southern Ontario, and Quebec. The most important of these games was the Grand Council of Chiefs, better known as lacrosse. This was truly a national sport, meaning it was played by virtually everyone from children to elders, men and women, warriors and chiefs. The origins of the game were shrouded in myth. One story held that it was invented during a battle between the Sky Woman, the Earth Woman, and the Water Woman. When they fought, their weapons flew into the sky and became stars. But here on Earth, their followers continued to fight using wooden sticks and a ball made of woven reeds. Eventually, this became a ritualized contest, a nonviolent reenactment of the cosmic battle. Lacrosse was played on a field surrounded by a fence or wall and 2 goals. Each team consisted of 25 players who ran, passed, and carried the ball toward their opponent's goal using a hooked stick. The game was a test of skill, strategy, endurance, and bravery, requiring players to use every part of their body and demanding perfect control of their breath. It also involved a good deal of chance. The ball was often unpredictable, bouncing oddly when it hit the ground or floating in unexpected directions when thrown in the air. This encouraged players to always be ready for anything. As one Iroquois man put it, you never tell what sudden move your opponent might make. Lacrosse wasn't just a game. It was a vehicle for teaching young men how to be strong, disciplined, and observant. Its strategic complexity was matched only by its spiritual significance. Before playing, players prayed and gave thanks for their lives. They also engaged in purification rituals and ceremonies to heal injuries, prevent injuries, and prepare for competition. There were even special prayers for when a player scored a goal. Lacrosse was considered a gift from the Creator, something to be respected and honored. This reverence for the game permeated all aspects of Iroquois culture, shaping everything from the tools they used to play it to the stories they told about it. Another highly popular sport among the Iroquois was football, a sort of ancestral soccer played with a ball that could be kicked, thrown, carried, or tossed. Two teams competed to score by throwing the ball into the other team's goal, which was defended by a stone wall. Goals were typically worth 1 point, but could also be worth 2 or 3, depending on how they were scored. Players could advance the ball by running with it or by kicking it forward or laterally, but they couldn't kick it backward. They could also throw the ball to a teammate, but only if they were stationary and couldn't throw it forward. If a player holding the ball ran too far with it or threw it illegally, the other team got the ball. But rather than being a free-for-all, the game required considerable finesse. There were strict rules against holding, pushing, tripping, kicking, or striking opponents. This sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Well, the parallels between early football and modern football are obvious and undeniable. Indeed, the U.S. Soccer Federation recognizes football as one of the foundational sports that influenced the development of association football. Traveling south from the Great Lakes, we encounter another tradition of ball games among the Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest. These games can be traced back thousands of years and were played throughout the region, though probably the best known came from the Hopi tribe. Invented around 1500 CE, the Hopi ball game was played with a small hard ball made of leather and yarn that weighed around 2 pounds. It was usually about 3 inches in diameter and could be kicked, thrown, batted, or rolled. Teams of 5 or 7 players competed to score points by propelling the ball into one of 3 baskets set at different heights along a 200-yard court. Now, while the basics of the game sound pretty straightforward, the Hopi ball game was actually immensely complex, involving dozens of rules and regulations that dictated how each position was played and how points were scored. You see, scoring didn't just depend on making it into the basket. The goal was to make it without touching any part of your person except for the foot with which you kicked the ball. And there were special rules about how the ball had to be kicked. For instance, players couldn't simply use their toes. Instead, they had to kick the ball with the bottom of their feet and in a particular direction. If the ball went straight up in the air, it was called a mass and was out of bounds. If it went straight down, it was called a stoop and was playable. The beauty of the Hopi ball game lay not only in its physical challenge, but also its mental demands. It was a game of constant motion, requiring lightning-fast reflexes and pinpoint accuracy. At the same time, it was a highly ritualized affair, governed by a strict set of customs and traditions designed to ensure that everyone played fairly and with respect for their opponents. So those are just a few of the sports that Native Americans played before the United States existed. For more on this topic, check out the series on my channel, as well as additional resources.